Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Warrant Officer Wes Intaha. We warmly welcome the family of Private Samuel Poole, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be placed at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the War Memorial. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read a story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Samuel Poole. Samuel Poole was born in 1893 in Staffordshire, England, to Annie and Robert Poole. Samuel, known as Sam to his family and friends, attended the Blurton Church School and then worked at the local sewer works. In 1912, Sam immigrated to Australia. He settled in the Buwarra region in New South Wales, sharing farm duties with his brother Robert and 3 other men at Plains Creek. Poole enlisted into the Australian Imperial Force on the 28th of January 1915. After 3 months training at Liverpool in New South Wales, in April he sailed from Sydney aboard the troop ship Argyllshire, bound for Egypt. Encamped at Heliopolis, he wrote a letter home telling his brother that he was having a jolly good time in this land of sand and dust. On the 26th of May 1915, a month after the Australian landing at Anzac Cove, Poole joined the 2nd Battalion at Anzac Cove. Poole's battalion commander recorded in his field diary that Poole and the 128 reinforcements who arrived with him looked a good solid lot of men. On the same day, Lance Corporal William Beach of Poole's 2nd Battalion first trialled the periscope rifle, an ingenious invention that allowed Australian troops to fire on Turkish lines from the trenches without exposing themselves to enemy fire. But the novelty of the new invention was short-lived. As soon as it arrived at the front, the 2nd Battalion came under heavy Turkish shelling, something that Poole would have to get used to over the coming months. 3 days later, Turkish forces set off 2 enormous mines under the lines held by the 2nd Battalion. The commander of the battalion recorded that a column of earth was thrown about 60 feet into the air. Earth fell all over our lines, even on our parade ground. 2 engineers in Australia's tunnels were killed. But by a stroke of extreme luck, Poole and the rest of the men were behind the lines having tea and therefore were not hurt. Poole spent the next 2 months enduring the hardships of warfare on the Gallipoli Peninsula. His battalion did not take part in any major battle, but spent their time manning the front line and resting. At the front, the men would come under intermittent Turkish shelling, rifle, machine gun and sniper fire. On the 22nd of June 1915, Poole wrote to his brother, noting, "This place reminds me of the farm at home, where we had to carry our water up the hills. Only it's more dangerous with having shells to dodge." On the 6th of August 1915, the 2nd Battalion led the charge at the Battle of Lone Pine. The operation was designed to divert Turkish forces from a major Allied offensive to the north at Hill 971. After 3 days of artillery fire on Turkish positions, at 5:30 p.m. on the 6th of August, Australian troops charged into no man's land with the blinding sun setting at their backs. Still recovering from the heavy bombardments, Turkish troops were not able to man their guns until the Australians were close to their positions. But when the Australians reached the enemy trenches, they found the Turkish troops well defended and the trenches covered over with roofs of pine logs. Some of the Australian troops took to removing the roof and assaulting the Turkish front line trench, while the majority of Australians attacked the more exposed Turkish communications and supply trenches in the rear. As the Australians advanced into Turkish lines, the fighting was brutal and hand-to-hand. After about half an hour, Australian troops reached a depression that contained Turkish headquarters and support units and came under heavy counter-attack. The Australians were now in charge of the main trench lines, but under constant heavy attack in their exposed positions. After building hasty sandbag barricades to block Turkish attacks, Australian troops had to endure 3 days of unrelenting heavy counterattacks and grenade bombardments. In this battle, Poole was employed as a dispatch rider. His job was to run important messages from the front line to unit commanders to help direct the battle. On the 8th of August, while the 2nd Battalion was defending against the Turkish counterattacks, he was sent to request reinforcements. While carrying the message, he was shot by a Turkish sniper and killed instantly. He was 23 years old. He was the first man from his adopted home at Boorowa to fall in the Great War. He was also one of 2,277 Australian casualties suffered at the Battle of Lone Pine. In the chaos of the fighting, Samuel Poole was originally reported as missing in action. His body was eventually found by a Lieutenant McNeil of the 10th Battalion, who confirmed his death. McNeil devoted great energy after the war to tracking down Poole's family, ensuring that his treasured watch ended up in the right hands. McNeil's first attempt to contact the family was originally dismissed by Samuel's brother as a hoax. But 2 years later, a second letter was received, and McNeil was able to provide the family with details of Sam's death and send them his timepiece. The watch was sent to Samuel's brother Robert in Boorowa, Australia, and then returned to his grieving mother in England, where it remains with the family to this day. It took 9 years for the watch to come back into the family's possession. Samuel Poole now rests in the Lone Pine Cemetery on Gallipoli, where 1,167 Commonwealth servicemen are buried. Private Samuel Poole is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Samuel Poole, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we who grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.